commercial property that cost over $3 you use that business, right? So if you buy a car and you pay sales tax, you're paying the sales tax. Now, the business will send the sales tax in, and when they count, how much do you want to pay? Because the business isn't going to pay it, you are. Every dime that you put on that business. And so one of the things, and I apologize, Barry, one of the things that will so let's say you're Sears Roebuck, and Sears Roebuck wanted the money that they had for other kinds of things, and they went bankrupt. So, I'm gonna try something. Is the connection really bad here?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I didn't hear pretty much. I didn't hear much of what you said on Prop 15, and so I'm not sure if you have a phone device that may be able to pick up clearer.
I'm gonna try something. If
Okay.
You can give me about 5 minutes, I'm going to switch from a being on to
Wireless.
a hardwired system.
Hardwire work a lot better.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
Let me switch. So give me just a second here. I apologize for the
No problem.
inconvenience.
While he's setting that up, Reverend Settles, the thing that the one of the other things that happened with 15 that so many people are against, and what happened with 15 is that so many people don't realize that small businesses are the ones that are going to pay the taxes. Then the person in the small business is going to have to charge it to the person who's using the service or buying the items. So it's always going to be something that the poor people will end up paying for it. They keep thinking that rich people are going to pay this. They call it the Disneyland tax. And they say, oh, Disneyland is going to pay for it. Well, you notice Disneyland is almost bankrupt.
Right.
Disneyland is not in real good shape. So for people to start saying that that's what's going to happen, it's not.
So the small businesses will push that tax on to the customer.
Right.
I got you.
And so if it's a barbershop, I think there's one ad on TV right now, and it's a black guy that saved up 13 years to have a barbershop, and he rents from a mall. In his lease, it's written that he has to pay the taxes. That's a part of his lease agreement. Right. And everyone that's in that shopping center have to pay the taxes. Mm-hmm. So that rich man that owns the building doesn't have to pay.
Okay. Okay.
I'm trying.
So no on 15.
Yeah.
So that's why that's just one or two of the reasons why we're also agreeing with
as Senator Wright was explaining, that's what I was thinking. And so you've clarified that. You've made that clear for me. Thank you.
Did that get any better? My
yes,
connection?
Sir. That's
okay.
Better.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's the other point that I was going to make is what the Assemblywoman was describing is called a triple net lease. And a triple net lease is just that. If the taxes go up, the person who's renting the property has to pay the triple net lease. So it's not exactly free. And again, with 15, with 14 going back for people that didn't hear, the work that is done is very important. And the idea was when we passed the first of these many years ago, We were hoping that the federal government would pick up this work. Well, they haven't. And so now the question is, do we continue this work or do we let it go? And again, people have used this and it has saved lives. So it's a tough call, 14. I'm actually going to vote for it. The LA Times went no, but I'm going to vote for it because I happen to know a few people who have lived because of stem cell research. And if it wasn't for the fact that we did it in California, those people would have been dead. 15, we just talked about, and again, it's a tough call because everybody wants more money. But if you like 15, remember that you're going to pay it. So if there's a McDonald's that you go to and that McDonald's is part of a strip mall, his triple net lease means that your hamburger is going to cost more money. So don't think that it's free. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. That money's going to come out of your pocket. It just makes
paying more for my French fries then, huh?
Yeah, your French fry is going to go up. Now, some people would say you shouldn't eat them anyway, but
that's also give you less French fries in your package.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go. Proposition 16, I mean, for the people who are old enough to remember in 1996 when the white people went out and got the black guy. I don't even like saying his name too much, but
Ward Connerly, just say it.
Yeah. But when they went and got that guy to basically be the poster child for getting rid of affirmative action programs. So, I mean, we have to stand on it. Shirley Weber in the assembly was able to get this through. And I got to tell you, if it wasn't for the fact that you had the beating of the brother in Milwaukee and all the other things that happened, this wouldn't have gotten out. She tried 3 times, but the 3rd time was the charm because you had so many issues that were affecting Black people.
Okay.
The thing that they're doing particularly well this go round is that rather than simply talk about Black people, they've added women, Latinos, and other people to the mix so that you now have a situation where it's not just Black people against white people, but it's women and Latinos and other people. And there's a little bit of sorrow now for the things that have happened to Black people in the past. Ward Connerly is actively campaigning against Proposition 16. They've had great commercials. I would hope that everybody would do that. And remember something else about these programs, in that it's not just about going to college. That is a thing. But it's also about contracts in government. It's about many times getting jobs at the city or the state. In many instances, there are other things where you're able to get some benefit. And sometimes people like Ward Connerly say, oh man, you shouldn't get no benefit. Yes, you should. Because if you've gone through 400 years of discrimination and the things that we've gone through, they haven't begun to pay back. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you were around before 1970, you couldn't half buy a house nowhere because even though you had the GI Bill, they discriminated where you could go. We could look at discrimination and things that have happened. So don't feel guilty about the fact that you're taking a benefit from Proposition 16 and say we want to be able to do that and give it to go. Now, Proposition 17. Proposition 17 would allow parolees to vote. Well, what does that mean? So in 1976 in California, we passed a law that said a person with a felony could vote once he cleared parole, because parole was considered at the time a part of his jail sentence. And so until he cleared parole, he still couldn't vote. This would change that rule to say that people who were on parole could vote. Sounds simple enough, but you have people who say, well, he hasn't paid his full debt to society, so he shouldn't be able to vote. This is important because oftentimes people who get out of prison have a whole different perception about what has gone on and the way the world works. And sometimes being in prison gives them an insight that you don't otherwise have. So I would hope that we would all vote yes on 17. The LA Times, by the way, is yes on 17. Proposition 18 is similar in that it says that a 17-year-old who's going to be 18 before the next general election would be able to vote. The beauty of that is in many instances, like let's say let's say you had someone who was going to turn 18 in October. This would have allowed them to vote in the March primary, so that they would have had that opportunity to vote because they were going to be 18 at the time of the next general election. It's a pretty straightforward measure, and I hope that we would get into that and vote yes. Proposition 19 is very complicated because on its face, it's very simple. Oftentimes, if you're buying a house, as many of us have today, you purchase a house and you've been in the house for 20 years. Well, the value of your house has gone up considerably, but Proposition 13 from years ago kind of saved you from increases in property taxes. If you were to buy another house, you would pay 1% of the value of the new house. And so a lot of people are kind of trapped into a tax prison because they own a house, but if they sell it and buy a new house, in some cases, even if they buy a house that's less expensive, they're kind of in a trap, in a prison. Now, there are other things that you can do as a person over 55 to mitigate some of the taxes. But here's where you have to be careful is that, you know, they threw a sweetener in this to say that people whose homes burned down in the recent fires would be able to buy at the property tax rate that their old house was in. So that sounds like a good sweetener, but you have to be careful because a lot of times you've got people who built up huge amounts of equity and letting them sell and buy a cheap. So you might have a house, I'll give you an example. I bought a house in Baldwin Hills for $300,000 20 years ago. Today it's worth $1.5 million. I'm paying a rate of $300,000 and something. Now, suppose I were to buy a house in another area for $1.5 million. Should I still be entitled to pay the rate of the $300,000 and something that I initially bought the house for 20 years ago? And if everybody starts doing this, then the tax rate, it's another benefit going down. It's a tough call because for those people who had their houses burned down in these recent fires, they want a break. If it was just that group of people, it would be an easy call, but it's a much bigger deal than that. And the pusher for this is actually the realtors because they know that it'll help them sell more houses. So this is a really tough call. You have to really look at it. It's not a simple proposition because most of the people who will benefit from this are particularly people who are fairly wealthy, who have a very expensive house, want to buy another house, and don't want to pay the property tax on the new house that they're purchasing. So that's the challenge, and we have to look at that.
Senator Wright, isn't there some kind of caveat in there that if you wanted to pass because we have to develop, we have to garner wealth. Black people don't have any wealth.
Right.
In this particular proposition, as I understand it, the person selling the house, the parent that's going to give and bestow to their children the house, then they can't do that. There's not a benefit for them.
That kind of goes away. I mean, and what we're going to have to do, Assemblywoman, is we're going to have to train our people much better in how to retire and how to transfer wealth. One of the things that, for example, you can do with your house now is to put your house into a trust and put the kids into the trust. That would guarantee that they would get the same tax benefit that you get because they're a part of the trust, and the title wouldn't have to change when you place it in the trust. Again, you have to talk to your tax person and see what makes sense for you, but we've got to do a much better job of actually deciding what's the best for our families. One of the things that will just break your heart, if you go into any courthouse where they're doing property, and you look at Black people out in the hall fighting over who's going to get mama's house. You got one who says, I want to sell it because I want my money, because I want to go buy me a Mercedes. And you got one who says, this is mama's house and we shouldn't sell it and we should hold on to it and keep it in the family. And because they can't agree, it gets sold in probate and the house is gone. And to your point, Sister Brown, we lose wealth and generational wealth as Black people. We've got to do a better job of holding on to our property. And this kind of it tries to get there, but it has some challenges. Proposition 20. Now, some of you may recall a few years ago, we did Proposition 47 that I worked on. And Proposition 47 said that a lot of minor crimes would become misdemeanors and you'd get out of jail. And then we did 57 that changed some of the drug laws that again said that people could get out of jail. Now, contrary to what people might think, you know, crime has gone down in California. There's been a slight increase with the COVID stuff because you just had people on the street with no money. But by and large, for the last 5 years since Proposition 47 passed, crime has gone down. Well, when crime goes down, people don't go to prison as much. When people don't go to prison as much, prison guards don't get as much money. Police want more stuff and they don't get much. This was placed on the ballot by the law enforcement people. And basically what it does is it essentially overturns Prop 47 and Prop 57. And they added another thing to it, which was when you get busted, you'll get your DNA taken. Okay, now in the old days, they did fingerprints, but now they're going to do fingerprints and DNA. That'll become a part of your arrest record. And you'll have more people going to jail. I would vote no on this. The LA Times also went no on this because there's really no need to start putting low-level offenders back in prison. It's a poor use of money. It didn't work. And we spent a whole lot of money. As a matter of fact, the crime bill that the federal government did, we spent all that building prisons and that kind of thing. We don't need to do that again. Proposition 20 is the law enforcement prison guard relief bill so that they can get more money. Now, Proposition 21 is a tough call. So let me admit on the front end, I am a 40+ year rental property owner. I've been in the rental housing business for over 40 years. The guy who wrote this proposition has a thing on for rental property owners. But what it does is, and again, for full disclosure, in 1995, I helped write what is a law that's called Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins does 3 things. One, it says that there will be no rent control on houses, period. If it's a single family house in California today, it does not have rent control. 2, Costa-Hawkins says that if you have rent control on a house and the tenant moves out, that the new tenant will pay whatever the market rate is for that unit. And then the third thing it says is that if there was a property built after 1995, there would be no rent control on that unit. Now that varies in some cities because some cities it was before that. And so like in LA, 1979 is the day that you don't do rent control before. This would effectively get rid of Costa-Hawkins. If you think you've got a housing shortage today, wait until you effectively drive out all of the small landlords. Because we are over 60% of the people who rent property in California. Now, that's changing because the big boys keep taking the property. If this passes, all of the small mom and pop landlords like me are going to be driven out of business because we won't be able to afford to play. I'll give you an example again in a personal side. I have a tenant who's been in one of my buildings, it's a 2-bedroom, for 30 years. Her rent is $750 a month. Should she move, I would rent that unit easily tomorrow for $2,000 a month. Now, I'm not trying to raise her to $2,000 a month. I would have done that a long time ago if that's what I wanted to do. But the idea that I'm limited is scary. The other thing that this does is it says that if you own more than one house, so for example, let's say in this case, Sister Brown, that you want to leave your house to your children and your children may have a house. Well, if they decide that it's in a trust, then it would no longer be protected from rent control. If they ever acquire another house, it would not be protected from rent control. So this is a tough call because again, you have people who will never purchase property and they think that the rent should be as cheap as it could get. The challenge that we have in California is that we've made it so difficult to build here that more and more people are simply getting out of the rental housing business. I can remember in the old days when they used to say, you should get some units, and that was a good idea. Well, today it's becoming a challenge and more people are getting out. Fewer units are being built. More people are coming to California and the market is getting that much tighter. So again, if you are going to stay in your rental apartment for a long time, you don't plan to move, you never want to go anywhere, then Prop 21 might be good for you. But if you're looking to move, if you're looking to acquire property, if you're looking to expand your holdings, then this ain't no good for you, because ultimately you'll have to sell out to the big boys.
Also,
Proposition.
Senator Wright, with that particular proposition, the governor has put together and they passed it, he signed it.
Yes.
And it only went into effect this year.
Yes.
It hasn't had an opportunity to work so that it works as kind of a balance for rent control and for the people who own the houses or own the property.
Absolutely. We now have rent control in the entire state, and it's 5% plus the cost of living is what the rent is now. That's in every city, whether that city had rent control or not. It doesn't forbid the city from enacting their own program on top of that. And it can be less, as a matter of fact. But every city in the state of California, every house is now under rent control from the state. We should allow that to move forward and work before we come in and start taking away programs that have worked before. Proposition 22, I gotta tell you, this has been a real tough battle. Many of you ride Uber and Lyft. Many of you use those app services or gig services. The state passed a law, AB 5, that said that all of the people who work for Uber and Lyft would become employees. What a lot of people miss is that when you start a business, you might go 5 or 10 years before you actually make money. So to start an Uber might cost you $4 or $5 billion. And you might take in money for the first 5 or 6 years, but you're nowhere near getting your money back. But people say, wow, they're making all this money. Well, again, it's always tough when you start counting other people's money. The other thing about Uber and Lyft is that they were never designed to be full-time employment for people who did that. It was designed for people to have auxiliary income. So most of the people who drive for Uber and Lyft have another job. Now, more and more as the job market has become tighter, for some people, that's their only job is Uber and Lyft driving. So this is a real tough call. I got to tell you, there's no real right or wrong here. The challenge is that the unions have decided that they're going to fight because taxi cab drivers were getting wiped out by Uber and Lyft. The technology that Uber uses, where I can simply pick up my cell phone, call an Uber, it'll be to me in perhaps 5 or 10 minutes. I don't have to pay them because my account is already done. Taxi cab drivers are trying to come into the 21st century with Uber and Lyft. But the challenge becomes, should we take that guy who's a school teacher or that guy who has another job, or the lady who's a nurse who's working this a few hours a week for extra money, should we kick them off the roll? We now have about 150,000 people who are in this kind of work. If they all had to become employees, about 100,000 people would lose that income. Now, you might argue that might be a good thing. Then some people would say, and then we could make a union and they would get more benefits and other kinds of things. I am probably going to vote no, because all the people that I know who are Uber and Lyft drivers all have other jobs, and this is their supplemental income. They would lose because they don't want to quit their job and go do Uber. I mean, they're school teachers, so they have health care, they have all that. Uber is what they use for extra money. It is a tough call, and I wish I could say, oh, this is real easy, because again, you have a lot of people where this is their only income, and they do need health care, and they do need unemployment, and they do need all those things. The question is, how do you pay for it? And should we have what are called contract employees working? That's what this is about. It's a tough call, and it depends on what side of that issue you find yourself as to what you'll do.
I believe, I have to come up on this one because I'm on the other side of it. I believe the yes vote should be on that one. How many of you college students are driving Uber and Lyft to make it so that they can go to college. There's no reason why you can't have your own business, and everyone doesn't have to be an employee. Plus, this particular measure is going to give them health care, and it's going to give them something else. But the things that there's a couple other things that you get with this particular proposition.
Right.
That wasn't a part of the Uber.
Of the original thing. So,
yeah.
you know, actually we're the same. I'm, like I said, I really lean yes. The challenge is, again, unlike some of the other propositions, what the gig workers did here, Uber and Lyft, is rather than simply do a referendum on AB 5, they actually crafted their own program that provides some benefits. And so it's not, do we have benefits or don't we have benefits? But the benefits are scaled to depend on how much you need them. So for example, a school teacher doesn't need healthcare. So the school teacher wouldn't go for the healthcare, and so they would keep working. It's a real tough call, but again, for all of those individuals who drive Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, who this is their only income, they do need the healthcare and the other kinds of things. It is a really tough call, and it is probably going to be the way that our system begins to work, because as new businesses start up, they don't have enough money initially to cover all those expenses. And so you got to look at it and understand that if this passes and Uber and Lyft stay in business in California, that they'll probably lay off about 2/3 of the people that are working, because they will want more full-time people as opposed to having people that do 4 or 5 hours a week. It's a tough call. It made me, like I said, I really lean yes. I'm still having to pray about it, Pastor, because it's one of those things where it makes you look at it, but it's not a simple call, because if you have someone who this is their only income and they need health care and they need unemployment and they need those kinds of things, then, you know, being a contract worker, they don't get that. On the other hand, if you have a student who only drives 10 hours a week, and this is what they do to supplement their college education, they would be wiped out. So it's not an easy call, and I think I lean yes on this one. 23 is another one that's not easy, I gotta tell you. So the unions who represent people who work at dialysis clinics have put in a number of rules that would make a dialysis clinic more expensive. They would have to have doctors on site. They would have to do a number of things that would make the cost more expensive. The challenge here is this. If the people who pay the bill for the dialysis don't cough up more money, then a lot of the clinics, particularly those in communities of color, would probably go out of business. And that means that a lot of people who get dialysis on a regular basis in, say, in South Los Angeles, where I am, would end up having to go to hospitals to get dialysis care. I mean, part of the reason that the dialysis business grew was that there were so many people coming in, particularly people of color, that it made sense to build these little centers and let people go there and schedule it on a regular basis so that they didn't have to go into the hospital. But as that business grew and the people who were working, they believe, pretty much like the Uber drivers, that they should get more benefits. This is their third bite at this apple, to get more benefits for the people who work at the dialysis clinics. It's a tough call. Again, I'm probably going to be a no, because again, it's a tough call for me to just say I'm going to watch some of those clinics close, because the ones that will close first will be in the communities of people that look like us. And that's a challenge for me. Proposition 24, again, in California, we've got a number of bills that deal with consumer data privacy. And this would establish some new rules that would do that. There's some people who don't like it because they think it goes too far. There are other people who think this would be a great start. I'm personally going to join the LA Times here and go, yes. I think that we could increase some of those benefits. If you ever go online today, and let's say that you looked up a pair of tennis shoes while you were online, you'll notice right after that, you're gonna start getting ads about tennis shoes. That's because whether it was Google or whomever, They sold your information to the tennis shoe guy. And information is just being sold and traded so much these days that we need to slow the roll on some of that so that it doesn't work as fast. So,
but aren't we layering a whole new system on?
kind of,
This is a
yes.
whole new system. It doesn't make sense.
It's a tough call. I mean, right now the system that we have isn't doing all that it should. And I would prefer personally that the legislature went back to work and basically revamp the system that we have. Right. The problem is that, you know, Assemblywoman, that when you get into the committee and the different lobbyists come in and argue, and, you know, before you know it, you end up where you ain't got nothing. The program that we have took almost 4 or 5 years to get done in the legislature. This adds more, it takes away some stuff. It's a tough call. I'm
no on that one. I just want you to know. I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah. I went with the LA Times. The LA Times went yes, I went yes. And the last of the propositions, Reverend, is Proposition 25. And, you know, what I've said to people when I've discussed this one is everybody here should go online and look at a story about a brother in New York whose name was Khalif Browder. And the story of Khalif Browder, if that doesn't break your heart, then you ain't got one. Khalif Browder was 15 and he was arrested in New York for allegedly stealing a backpack. He was given something like $15,000 bail for stealing a backpack.
Oh yeah, okay.
And his family didn't have the $1,500 to get him out. He sat in jail for 1.5 years, almost 2 years. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a gang member. So if you can imagine being a 15-year-old boy in Rikers Island with some of the roughest kids in the world, he was beat up so much that they had to put him in solitary confinement to protect him. Then being in solitary confinement, he cried a lot. So then the guards started beating him up. After he got out of prison, he lived about 1.5 years and he committed suicide because that whole time just drove him crazy. There are people now who the DAs and the like will see to it that they get high bail to force them to plead guilty. There are people who mortgage their houses and lose them because they've done the bail bond, but they can't pay the money back and their house was collateral and they lose their houses. This bill would repeal SB 10, which took 2 years to get done by the legislature. Is it perfect? No, but you know, we don't want to let the perfect become the enemy of the good. The challenge that we have with 25 is that it basically would restore the old bail system that everybody agrees that we want to get away from. There are 4 states that currently have gotten away from bail. Their crime rates didn't go up. And one of the things that they find when people don't appear in court is that they forgot. And so one of the things that all those states do is they call them the week before and the day before to say, Rod, don't forget you got court tomorrow. Sounds simple and trivial, but nobody wants to do that. Now, in California today, many of the bail bondsmen, that's what they do. Well, we should have somebody in the court system that essentially calls people to remind them to come to court. Now, if somebody is a flight risk or if someone is going to commit crimes again, then we don't let them out. And it shouldn't be a function of how much money they have, but it should be a function of whether or not they're a danger to society. So I'm going to vote yes, because I think the legislature made a good start. The argument that people make against it is there's a term called a risk assessment tool. They do that anyway. When your black behind walks into court, the judge looks at you and does a risk assessment when you standing there. If you think they don't, just look at what happens when you go to court. So we're already doing risk assessments. So that won't be anything different, you know. But again, several states, there are 4 states that do this now, Washington, D.C. included. There's not been an increase in crime. There's not been a decrease in people showing up. This would be a good idea because, you know, people losing their homes or going into super debt to get their son or daughter out of prison. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been on the receiving end of a call when one of your children is crying because they're in jail. I have taken that call with other people, other parents. I've gone out and hustled the money to pay the bail bondsman to get them out a couple of times. This would stop that practice because there would be no cash bail. I would vote yes on this. And
So
if we
do
need to,
So
if we
do
need
we
to
do,
adjust,
do we do away with Black businesses?
there
that-
will be, yeah, there will be some, yeah. I would hope that the Black bail bondsman can find another way to make a living.
I don't think that's fair. Celeste King right now is turning over in his grave.
I'm sure he is. He was a good friend of mine. And as a matter of fact, you know, I've probably given Celeste King over the years for different people and stuff I knew. I've given Celeste King $30,000 or $40,000 over the years. But the challenge is, if someone is not going to come back to court, if someone is a danger to society, then they shouldn't get out at all. But
the algorithms on these computers, we're getting into these computers that are doing algorithms.
Right.
And they say that the algorithms are biased. So I just want to say, I'm going to vote no on that one. And I would do that because my bail bondsman here in San Bernardino, Greenwood bail bondsman, been in bail bondsman business since before the owner now was even born. And so I think that we need to look at the whole system and maybe come up next time with a different plan. But those algorithms are going to keep you in jail.
I mean, and that, you know, and that could happen. I mean, and here's the challenge that I have. If we look in a year or so and the algorithms are doing that, then we go back and adjust the law. I mean, we cannot, I mean, the thing.
Proposition, you can't adjust it.
No, it's not true. The only thing that this does is repeals SB 10. This is not like the referendum on the car drivers. The only thing the bail bondsmen did is repealed SB 10. They don't have a proposal on the table. So we either go back to the old bail system or we start with a new system. But there is no, this is to repeal SB 10, that's all. It doesn't have any provisions in it that would allow for a change. This would repeal SB 10 and we would go back. And I understand, if I was in the bail bond business, like you said, Celeste King, I knew for a long time, and you know, his office down there on King and Dinker was certainly the spot. If you went by his office at 10, 11 o'clock at night, he was getting people out of jail at 100 miles an hour. But the challenge is, again, if you have bail at say $50,000 for a crime you didn't commit, and you're sitting in jail and you ain't got $5,000, what do you do? I mean, and you know, I mean, I know people, and you probably know people who've lost their jobs and lost houses because they couldn't get out of jail. And what really makes it sad is I know people this has happened to. I know people who have paid the bail, gotten out of jail, and then the DA rejected the case. You don't get your money back. So you paid $5,000 to get out of jail because you didn't do the crime and you know you didn't do it.
That's true.
And then the DA rejects the case, but you don't get any of your money back. Bail is a tough system. It's in the Constitution that there would be some way that you should get out. But remember, Proposition 25 is simply to repeal SB 10. There is no middle ground here. Again, don't confuse it with Proposition 22, because in Proposition 22, the Uber and Lyft people actually wrote their own plan. Right. So it's not a case of saying that they're going to repeal AB 5. They actually are putting in place a benefit program that's their own. In this one, all you're doing is repealing SB 10. So I would vote yes, because to really confuse you further, Pastor, yes means no.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? So
the risk assessment system would replace cash bail.
Yes. And again, if you take LA County, which I'm most familiar with, almost half the people in LA County jail are there because they couldn't pay bail. And again, a good percentage of them, the DA rejects the case anyway. And so, you know, for those who did pay the bail, they don't get any of that money back. That's what, I mean, I've known people, you probably known some too, who lost houses because they bailed out, DA rejected the case, but they don't get any of the money back.
Well, I have a good bail bondsman, so they don't quite do it that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, and it depends. I mean, I'll take my own case. Reverend, I had a case personal where, like I said, I own real estate. I was one of those kids a long time ago that said, you know, I don't know how long I'm going to work, so I'm going to buy real estate because I think it's a good investment. I have several houses in Los Angeles County. I was registered to vote at a house that I owned. I was charged with a residency violation and convicted of a residency violation. Mm-hmm. Now, I had a job, I had property. My bail was $75,000 to get out of jail so that I could go to work. So I didn't have the whole $75,000, but I did give my bail bondsman $7,500. Now, I kept going to court. I was convicted. I left the legislature. The governor actually pardoned me. I don't get any of my $7,500 back.
Right.
And there was no risk that I wasn't going to go to court. I wasn't going to flee the state because I own several $1 million worth of real estate. Right. The fact that I own several $1 million doesn't mean I have several $1 million because most of it's debt. But you know, my net worth is good if I'm writing one of those loan applications. But I had to put up $7,500 of cash money. Where am I going? Why do I have to do that? This would get rid of that. And I think that's the challenge. And I understand it. If I was in the bail bond business, I'd be fighting it too, because that's how I make a living. Mm-hmm. But hopefully this guy who was able to go into that business will find something else that he can do. But I just don't think that we should have people who are essentially trading on the misery of people who may have been unfortunate enough to do that. The LA Times joined me in saying yes, and it's a tough call. I wish I could say, wow, but hopefully those bail bonds people can find something else to do.
That's not fair. Reverend and Eunice, I'd like to introduce you to someone I invited to come. His name is Alton Garrett, and he is Barbara Boxer. He was her district director for many years and has retired along with her. And he's been doing a lot of the work that Senator Wright is doing right now. And I just want you to say hello and see if he had anything to say about that, about any of this.
Thank you, Assemblyman Brown. I appreciate that. I came in a little bit late. I didn't catch it all. I agree with Senator Wright on some of them, but some of them I don't agree with them on. But you know, that's democracy. You know, we all get a chance to express our opinions and everything. And I don't agree with him on 25. I think that 25 is a really bad thing for Black and brown people, you know, especially with the use of algorithms, because the algorithms can be written to say and do what you want them to say and do. And I think that we wind up having more Black and brown people still in jail, whether they got the money or not. You know, I still believe that we will see people who have the money to pay their bail, but the algorithm, the way it's going to be written, is going to keep them in jail. So they're going to be considered a risk anyway. So,
and that's a risk. I mean, I wish I could say that I trust white people enough where there won't be any foul play in that. I trust, but again, when I go to LA County Jail today and I see all them poor Black and brown people sitting in jail, many of whom are there simply because they don't have any money. I think most of those people would get out. I mean, the judges now, for example, in many instances have an opportunity to do what's called an OR, which means own recognizance. Right. They could let people go. Often they just choose not to do it. And what I found over the years is that in many cases, the police, the bail bondsmen, and the judges all work in cahoots. And again, it's poor people who do that. And I agree, Brother Garrett, could they do algorithms that work against Black people? Yes. Are they going to work more against Black people than the current system? You can't get no worse than we got now. I mean, it can't get no worse. I mean, the only thing that would get worse now is if they started more shooting people on the street. And in some cities, they're already resorted to that. I mean, so the idea that you have in Los Angeles County, 50% of the people are in jail because they didn't have enough money to pay bail. Most of the crimes weren't violent. They just were, in some cases, it was shoplifting or something like that. I mean, and the bail for that might be $50,000 and they ain't got $5,000. I agree that there's a potential for mischief in the establishment of the risk assessment, but at the same time, nothing can be much worse than what we currently have. Rem, I hope this is a good discussion for you because
it is. I got a notebook full of notes.
No, because again, I mean, if you listen to a floor debate in the legislature, this is exactly what we do.
This is just what we're doing.
This is what it is. I mean, and if I were a bail bondsman, I'd be making the case because many of them actually drive their clients to the courthouse. I mean, I've seen bail bondsmen do great work. I mean, Sister Brown mentioned Celeste King. He passed away, but he was the king of Black bail bondsmen in Los Angeles for a number of years. And Celeste actually was able to let a lot of people get out of jail and didn't even charge them. I mean, and he would work out other deals so that people could get paid, because you have to understand something else about the bail bond business. There are but 4 companies in the state of California that actually write the insurance policy. So let's say that you have a bail bond that's $50,000. Okay, so you pay $5,000. Well, the bail bondsman didn't have to pay but $500 to that insurance company, and he kept $4,500. And once you reported to court, the bail gets goes back in, and he pockets all of the money. It's not that often that the $50,000 is ever paid out. And so the challenge is there's a risk. Could they do more risk assessments and put more Black people in jail? Absolutely. Do they do that now? Absolutely. The only difference is one way they're going to do it for $5,000 or $10,000 a whop, and the other way they're going to do it, it won't cost you any money. If I'm going to sit in jail for a year or two waiting for a trial, particularly those where there's a DA reject, then I would do that. And see, the other thing, again, and the people who are fighting this are the DAs as well. Because I got to tell you about the criminal justice system in America and California in particular. They will go into the jailhouse, Reverend, and say, Rod, if you go ahead and cop to whatever, then you could get out of jail tomorrow. You don't have to sit in this jail because the bail and the amount that you pay is calculated into your plea. So again, if you plead, right? I mean, if you pay the bail, even if the DA rejects your case, you don't get a dime of your money back. That money gone. And again, even if the bail was $50,000 and you only paid $5,000, $5,000 is a lot of money to some people. I'd hate, I don't have $5,000 that I'm just willing to throw around. Like I say, my personal bail was $7,500. I had to cough it up because I had to go back to work.
And you want it back right now, huh?
Huh?
And you want that $7,500 back?
Every time I drive by one of them bail bonds places, my ears start to boil because they got me for $7,500.
But you got out of jail. You didn't have to.
Oh yeah. No, in fact, when I was in that little time I was there, when I looked at them other people, I would have called my mama to try to get the rest of the money like other people do. Because I looked at them people and I was like, oh Lord Jesus, I don't want to be here with you. But no, I'm just saying it is a tough call. Yeah. And if I was in the bail bond business, I would be absolutely in the same position that they're in. That happens not to be my business. And when I look at the abuse, both in jail and people who lose houses and property because they had to pay the bail and didn't have the money, I would say I'm going to vote yes and hope that SB 10, if it does as Brother Garrett describes, then next year I hope that they will make some adjustments to it so that the risk assessment tools are more fair. But again, right now, the judges can do an OR, which means own recognizance. We don't get them that much. So my concern would be let that brother out of jail, particularly if he's got a job or doing something, and allow him to do stuff. The other thing that this will provide for, and they're doing this more, is ankle bracelets. So in many cases, they'll just let you out of jail and you wear an ankle bracelet for a while. I would rather be at home with an ankle bracelet than sitting in jail.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Wright, Senator Wright, I want to just thank you. This was a lot of information to take in.
A lot of information.
A lot of information. I know some of you have possibly already voted. Hopefully you voted with your heart and with your head. And Mr. Garrett, I'm sorry, I did get a notice from Ms. Brown. I didn't understand it. Thank you for attending. Is there anything you would like to just share with us before we do a little question and answer?
No, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the call and to be on this session here. I've done what Senator Wright is doing. I've done it in several different times in several different locations and all. And this is actually this may sound a little crazy, but I love doing these propositions. I love getting into the weeds, on these propositions and trying to figure out, what is there and what is not there. I'm not an expert. I'm Al Garrett. I have a lot of experience in politics and everything, and with Assemblyman Brown and Senator Wright, we all know that, in politics is politics, so there's no right and wrong. It's just the way we finally get the bill passed, so, that's the things that we have to do, and we understand that. I don't have anything else. It's just that, for those who haven't voted, I encourage you to vote. I know that, and I don't know how many people on here know about Where's My Ballot. I just want to let you know that it does work, because I've tracked my ballot. I live in the San Bernardino County. I dropped my ballot in front of the registrar of voters office on a Friday, and on Wednesday of the following week, I got a text first that said that your ballot has been received and will be counted. And later on that evening, I got an email from the registrar of voters that said that your ballot has been received and will be counted. So you can go online and to find Where's My Ballot and then register for that, and it'll tell you exactly where your ballot is, and I encourage everyone to do that, so it gives you a little peace of mind as to what is happening with your ballot.
Is it where, can you put it in the chat?
I will.
Okay.
Thank you. I was going to vote this morning and then thought about it and thought I would wait until I sat on this panel so that I can get some education before I casted my vote. So I'm glad that I waited. You saved me a lot of homework.
There is a lot of work that different ones have done, and I just want to thank Ms. Brown again for working with me and assisting us so that we can get information out. This is such an important ballot.
It is.
The lay organization for the AME has also been doing some programs, and I'm just hoping that everyone that get to them, remind them to vote. If they're having problems, I know our church has also opened their hearts to say that if you can't get to the ballot, to the voting place, let the office know. We're ready to help wherever we can help. It's very important that we vote. It's very important that you have the knowledge. Reading the ballots and reading the information kind of confuses you at times. We were just trying to make sure that you know what a yes means and what a no means. Pastor, are we going to be able to share some of the comments? Because I saw some of the comments on here.
On the Zoom? I did see Sister Brown recommend no for 14 because there has been no accounting for the money and because Black people don't get any of the resources. That's the only chat that I see on the Zoom. I'm not sure if there's others on Facebook or YouTube. When last I checked on Facebook, I didn't see any comments.
I just like to share on 14 myself. Sickle Cell Foundation has been able to get some of the money from the bonds that have happened, and there have been some major changes for people with sickle cell. based on the stem cell research. So if you don't know anyone, well, I didn't use it, but we have people within our church that have gotten information, and some of their family members have been able to get their lives saved because of stem cell. So
The challenge, I mean, it's a tough call. I mean,
but it is hard because it
one
just
of the
depends on what you know.
I mean, and I'm voting yes because likewise, I just know some people who are still alive because of stem cell research.
That's right.
And the idea when we did this many years ago, it wasn't that California was going to assume this role for the whole country. And we were hoping that we would jumpstart it and that the federal government would take it over. Well, they haven't. And so some of that money is now gone, and, you know, we'll either re-up it or we'll let stem cell research go. And that's a tough call. But, you know, in our case, for example, the LA Times said this is a federal task and the state shouldn't be the one footing this entire bill. I'm going to vote for it because, again, I just happen to know some people who are alive because of the work that was done.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to share it because I also know someone, besides the fact I have sickle cell, but at my age, it's just I wasn't going to deal with it. But it has worked for people with sickle cell. And basically, no, the federal government nor the state really want to help us. But because of some of the organizations, it has worked. I did ask a question.
Well, they just started doing, they just came out with some treatment for sickle cell, but that's just in the last year or so, maybe.
Not really. If you, I belong to the, there's a lot of things going on, and the sickle cell stem cell that they did, the person went to DC, and it was done in DC. But I'm just saying, I do know it work.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
That's all.
If I may chime in, I'm a no vote on 14 because I don't quite understand why the taxpayers of California should pay to fund this, and then if and when they do find cures and find assistance for that, they're going to turn around and charge your insurance to treat you for that, and so you're paying for it with your taxes. This $5.5 billion that they're asking for this time really comes out to be $7.8 billion that we are paying back. It's not just $5.5 billion. We're actually paying back $7.8 billion. There's no accountability for what they have done before. That money is running out. And I agree with Senator Wright and that this is a federal thing. This is something that the federal government should be doing. It's not something that the state should be doing. And I understand that everybody who knows someone, then that gets personal for them. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not taking that away. I'm not taking that away because that's really, when this gets personal, you get personal, you know, and I'm not trying in any way to be personal, you know, with this. But I just think that we need to have accountability for the monies that we are giving away to these different organizations and everything, especially when you can't get accountability for what has happened to the money that was passed, I think, back in 2014.
And I agree. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to give the data.
No, good. I mean, because the LA Times, as I pointed out, agrees with you. Here's the challenge when you're doing research. You might do research on a stem cell cure and blow $2 billion and not come up with a cure. I mean, you don't have the idea of research is that you're doing research. You don't know how it's going to come out. Now, on the other hand, there are several people who are alive. There are people whose sickle cell treatments have gotten better as a result of the thing. There's an old saying that we used to say that everybody's a Christian as long as somebody else is carrying the cross. You know, you don't want to be the one that's worried about whether or not there's going to be a treatment for you when you get sick. And I got to tell you, if you go to some of the pharmaceutical companies, they try a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't work. I mean, by the time they get a medication that works, they done blown through a whole bunch of money. So I agree. And I hope that with some of these programs, and I don't know this for a fact, but I hope that the state government becomes a party to the profit when they do come up with something that works. I don't know that for a fact. That's normally how it works. I mean, what a lot of people don't know, for example, is that the University of California makes a whole bunch of money on treatments and things that they've developed that were done as a part of the school. And again, some of this is done with schools and other things. But because I've just seen some of the work that came out of this, and again, brother, you're right. There's so much money that can be just blown down the drain. You might try, it's just like in this thing that they're trying to do for COVID, right? Mm-hmm. They had X number of people who they were testing. One guy got sick, that stops the program. Right. And then you got to go back and find out why that person got sick. What else did he do? Research is not a absolute thing until it is. But you're right. And like I said, the Times agrees with you because they thought that we were going to jumpstart the federal government taking over, and they didn't. So that's the question. Does the federal government come in now? We don't know. But do we let go what we've already started?
Okay, thank you. Dorinda, anything you want to add to this?
I just actually had a question about Prop 20. Okay. You mentioned that I'm assuming if Prop 20 passes, that they'll start taking DNA from folks that get arrested.
Everybody who gets arrested, correct?
Everybody.
Yep.
So
yes, everybody who gets arrested will give up DNA.
Yeah, no. No.
Yeah, everybody who gets arrested will give up DNA, whether it's a misdemeanor, a felony, or whatever. They're making things that are felonies now. They're going to make them things that are misdemeanors now. They want to make them felonies now. There are this thing called wobblers where it could go either way, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. All of these will now become felonies and all. It's my opinion. Again, it's a good thing for the correctional officers union and the civilian jail systems to get more people in jail so they can keep up their contracts and keep up. We're not going to let anybody get out of jail. And also, I believe.
Now be careful. You're going to let people out of jail. You're going to have to turn on 25 in a minute.
No. Thank you, Senator Wright. I appreciate that. But I also think that Proposition 20, if you go back and read, look at AB 4757, 4757 and AB 109, I think that this kind of wipes out what they tried to do and everything. So,
So who's going to pay for the DNA? Who's going to be paying for all that testing? I mean, somebody's going to have to pay for it, right? So is that going to be us?
The arresting authority.
The taxpayers.
The arresting authority pays for any test that has to be done while you're incarcerated. It's you, the citizens, because they get their money from the taxes that are paid. So it's you. You're paying for it in
so
around.
Our taxes are going to go up.
Good. Yes.
That's going to hike your taxes up because that's a lot of DNA.
And more people will go to jail.
And more people will go to jail. More people will be incarcerated. Your taxes will eventually go up because I do not think, and I'm not positive, but I do not think that California has a surplus of money in the general fund, so that they can divvy that money out to law enforcement, to public safety and law enforcement to take up these new challenges that this Proposition 20 will bring.
I tell you what, as a person who served on the budget committee as both a staffer and a legislator, with the unemployment rate and some of the other things that we've seen in a state that gets almost 70% of its money from income tax, next year is going to be bloodletting in Sacramento. And if the federal government doesn't come up with more money that they've been talking about, this is going to be just obscene because, again, and a lot of people don't know that something like 8% of the people pay 85% of the tax. And those people are losing money. Imagine that you were one of the guys that had like Disneyland, there's 3 hotels in Beverly Hills that have closed down. This is going to be a tough year coming up next year for the state of California.
You know, you're looking at, you know, and thank you, Senator Wright, for saying Disneyland, because, you know, and the lady who was talking about the taxes, just look at the amount of taxes that may be coming out of Orange County presently, you know, because of the theme parks that are down there. You know, next year, well, this year, I shouldn't say next year, but when people down there file their taxes for 2020, you know, there's going to be a lot of no taxes due because they didn't make any money, you know, during that time. You know, there are businesses. There are several businesses that are situated across the street and within a mile of Disneyland that in all probability and all possibility that come 1 January, they would be shuttered.
Yep.
Because they have no business. They are not getting any business from Disneyland. There's nobody coming, you know, and there's no one coming there and all. And this is a big, big thing, you know, and, you know, it's right on point.
Yeah,
you know,
Anaheim,
taxes is going to be horrible.
The city of Anaheim is about to go bankrupt. So yeah, it's a wild time.
I did see some questions on Facebook that if I could ask these couple of questions.
Okay.
Say, can you go over all the rules for filling out the ballots for first-time voters? And some ballots may be disqualified because of mistakes. What are those specific mistakes? If you
Here's
could.
the thing. The key thing to remember is sign the back of the envelope and date the back of the envelope. Once it's signed and dated, there really are no other mistakes that you can make inside. I mean, if you vote wrong, I mean, there's no way for them to know that. That's just, you just chose wrong and they'll not know that. But if you don't sign the back of that application, that envelope, it won't even be counted.
Okay.
So sign it and date it and make sure you sign it and date it. It doesn't require postage. And what you can do is take it to a drop box. You can take it to the post. I'm actually going to take mine to SoFi Stadium because since I ain't got to go to a football game there this year, I'd at least get to go inside and look at it since I didn't get to watch a football game.
And also, as Senator Wright said, the back of it where you sign and date it, that is the most important. The only other thing that they need to just be careful of is if they vote twice for the same office, you know, for an example, say whoever's running for Congressional District 33, if they happen to circle both of the people who are running, then that vote goes away. That vote don't get counted.
Yeah,
but
that's
the rest
called
of your, right.
Yeah.
But
that's
the rest of your
that's called an overvote.
Right, but the rest of your ballot gets counted. So
Yes.
the number one thing that we need to stress, that must be stressed, is the signature on the back and the date. That's what keeps it. That will keep the ballot valid.
And Reverend, if I added another thing, is that on November 3rd at 8 o'clock, you have to get it in someplace.
Okay.
Yeah, it ain't no good on November 4th.
Okay.
It has to be in by November 3rd, signed and dated.
Sounds good. Thank you for that information.
Mr.
Okay,
Enos, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, I'll turn it back over to Sister Lisberg.
Okay, thank you. Well, we did very good. There's no other questions. I just want to thank everyone, and Pastor, thank you for allowing us to do this. I think it was important. Sorry it took us so long to pull it together, but you know, we needed to get this information out to our people.
Yes, ma'am.
Very important. Sir, can we close us out with a prayer, please?
Yes, again, I want to thank Sister Lisberg, Sister Dorinda for all of their work getting this together. Mr. Garrett, thank you for coming on. Sister Brown, Assemblywoman Brown, and Senator Wright, thank you so much for your time this evening. We at Allen Chapel, we appreciate it very much. Let us close now. God, for what our ears have heard, Lord God, we thank you. There are a lot of important decisions that need to be made in the next few days. And so, God, we pray that your spirit will move upon our heart, that we will move how you direct us to move. But most of all, God, we know that if we follow what you say for us to do, God, you will get all glory and honor. So, God, we pray for the society as we move towards this election. So many things are being heard and said, and so many people are on edge and afraid and fearful. God, we just pray that you would continue to be the God that you are. We look to you for our protection. We look to you, God, for everything. And we just ask for you to watch over us, keep us. And God, please get all glory and honor through everything that happens. It's in your son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Good night, everybody.
All right. God bless. Thank you.
God bless you. Good night.
Senator, see you again.
And thank you again, Cheryl.
Oh, no problem. I enjoyed it immensely.
Bye-bye.